Thank you for joining us today. This is the first of several planned fieldwork and focus series interviews, and we're delighted to be joined by Christian Dawid today. Before we officially, thank you. I'm going to introduce you properly in a minute, but a little bit of housekeeping first, and that is that Clara is going to put in the chat the links to Christian's website, the link to the Konsonans Retro website. She's going to put in there our donation link in case you would like to add something to the tip jar to help us fund this program. And we'd like to also extend a very big thank you to the Rabbi's Discretionary Fund at Congregation Albert in Albuquerque for giving us some funding support for this program. We're very excited about that, and we have a big thank you. And this is the first of what we hope is a number of interesting and informative Klezmer Institute programming initiatives. So, in terms of how we're going to go for the session today, Christian and I are going to be talking about his work, and we're going to play some videos. We're going to listen to some music. If you have a question, please put it into the chat. Put it into the chat function, or you can do I think you can do a raise hand function, but Clara is going to be monitoring the chat for us, and she will either interrupt, jump in at a moment of a pause in the conversation for a clarification, or we will most likely be holding our questions sort of until about 40 minutes in, and we want to leave a nice time for conversation and questions at the end of the session. So, Clara, do you see that Vasily is having a problem there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sending him a message. Everyone should know that if you're having technical issues, please feel free to message me directly instead of the full group, and I will try to help you solve your issues there. We've got a couple of people who are keeping track of what's going on tech-wise, so if sometimes the best thing to do is to just close out and come back in, and I promise I'll let you in as soon as you're back. So, thanks.
Cool. Okay, so on to the beginning of our official sort of session. I'd like to welcome Christian Dawid today. He is an extraordinary klezmer clarinetist. Many of you know him from his performances, teaching Trio Yash, the Other Europeans projects, from the Arkady Gender recording project, Bluer Than Blue, which is something I'm looking forward to listening to. And probably many of you have met him at Klez Canada, seen him in the Krakow Jewish Music Festival and all kinds of different places. But today we're here to talk specifically about Christian's work with Konsonans Retro and the Baranovsky brothers and the family in Kodyma, Ukraine. So let's give a warm welcome to Christian.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Looks like a meeting with friends anyway.
Absolutely. So let's see. I want to do a screen, before we dive in, I want to do a screen share so we can look at a map and get a sense of where it is that we're talking about, and then Christian will help us understand what it is and who it is that we're talking to and talking about. So I'm going to screen share, and while I'm doing this, Christian, maybe you want to tell us where we're going here.
Yeah, we're going to Western Ukraine, or yes, or we're still in the Odessa region, so it's a little bit confusing. We're basically up north of Odessa and leaning towards the Moldovan border. Yes, that's exactly.
So kind of right around
exactly
here near
where we are.
Soroka.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
It's
zoom
the
in.
northwestern edge of the Odessa region, and it's the district of Kodyma.
No,
And very close to the Moldovan border. Hold on.
I want Kodyma. So now we're gonna zoom out. Oops.
That looks like it.
That looks like it. Now you can go away. Collapse that. Kodyma, and then the village of Zagnikiv, if I'm saying it right, is right here, right on the
Yes.
Moldovan border.
Zagnikiv. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Christian, for a couple of minutes, and I'd love to hear you talk about how you met these guys, where you met them, and how it is that you ended up traveling to their village, to their town, to work with them.
Okay, great. I'll gladly do that. So the band, this is still part of the Podolia region, right? Of what we call Podolia, which is also what we know as the cradle of Hasidism in the Jewish world. And I met the band in 2005 in Vienna. There was a festival organized by Roman Greenberg, who's a musician and all kinds of things, an activist and a Yiddishist living in Vienna. And he comes from Moldova originally, actually from Belz. And he organized this festival, and he's friends with Isaac Loberan, a musician and ethnomusicologist from Moldova also, who lives in Vienna, who has been doing research about the tradition of brass bands in Podolia and their Jewish repertoire. He did that. He started that in the late 1990s and into the 2000s. And he knew the band and recommended them to Roman, who ran the festival in Vienna. I was also invited to the festival in Vienna to teach there and perform. That was where I first met the band and heard them and fell in love immediately with their music and also with the guys, because they're good people and fantastic musicians. So I became really interested in their repertoire, which is basically a blend of Ukrainian, Moldovan, Roma, and Jewish music, which is a mix that's in that region of Podolia quite natural. There are many ethnicities in Podolia who have been passing through or settling there through the centuries. But I heard from them like a good number of Jewish tunes that I did not know, that I'd never heard. So I became interested, and we jammed a little bit at the festival, and also rehearsed together, preparing a final performance together with Roman and all the people involved in the festival. And I just felt like I wanted to play with them more. No, because I was also interested in the connection because of the repertoire, how it's connected to what we know as klezmer music today, how it traveled through the centuries, how it changed, how it might not have changed, all that. Um, so I tried to get us some gigs. Actually, before we had a project, I went ahead and basically for the next year, for the next summer, I was lucky enough to get us performances at the Krakow Jewish Festival, Jewish Music Festival, and at the Klezmer Festival in Vienna. So that meant with these gigs being set up, that I had to go there, I think, to rehearse and get a concert program together. So next summer, in June of 2006, I traveled there for the first time with a very broken and very basic Russian, and it was a big adventure. But it went quite well and quite easily because I went there as a musician, and musicians everywhere kind of share the same nationality, and we share the same stories. And, when you play and perform, you don't need much spoken language. So that's where it all started.
Wow. You went by yourself that first time you just got on a plane
I
and a
went by
train?
myself. Yes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did your
Yeah.
Ukrainian get better during that trip?
Yeah, a little bit. Yes. I mean, we mostly spoke Russian. I mean, their mother tongue is
Mhm.
Ukrainian, but everybody, of course, speaks Russian. And they're also, just a few hours north of Odessa, which is mainly Russian speaking. So yes, and then with a lot of body language and whatever, it went well.
Right, but you're also speaking the sort of international musician language of we have a gig, and
Absolutely.
any
Yes.
band can speak that language. What's the set list? Let's rehearse. All of that stuff.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Okay, cool. So thank you for that. I'd like to do another screen share so that we can look at one of your videos that you
Okay.
shared with me, so that
Hmm.
we can kind of get ourselves into the location of where you are and what you
Great.
encountered on one of these first trips. So I'm going to screen share again. We're going to look at the video. Let's wind this back to the beginning.
Yes, and we're gonna see the band leader, the oldest of the three Baranovsky brothers, Vasya or Vasil, um, at his mother's home in Sagnitkiv that we visited just to hang out and play some music. Um, and he played a tune that he learned from his father that he says was his father's favorite tune. And you'll see what happens.
Cool, great. Great.
Yeah, so that's Maria Baranovska, who sadly passed away just this spring, mother of the three brothers who are core of the band, and grandmother to other young musicians who are also part of the band. Um, and what I liked a lot in this moment, it just happened, I just like Vasya just like said, I'm going to play a tune, that I cannot film it. Is like, yeah, of course, I'd like do it. And Maria just joined and went to the table and started drumming along, this kind of famous, very, very popular drumming pattern that we know from klezmer music and from that region and other regions as well.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you mentioned something yesterday about that tune that I found was very interesting, that particular tune. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So the Baranovsky family, they learned a lot of repertoire from their father, who was a very active and passionate musician, and who went to Moldova and all over the place to collect music. He loved music and loved to collect tunes. And they knew it as a Jewish tune that's also called a Funderchuppe. So would have been played at the end of the wedding ceremony if you leave the wedding canopy and start dancing and celebrating. So this is one of the rare occasions where actually a tune has a Jewish name, and it's super interesting because, like, I mean, this tune could be Jewish to me. It could also not be Jewish. It sounds like it has a shared musical language, which I think also has to do with the way it's played. If you give it a slightly other intonation, you can easily think of this also as a Yiddish song, for example.
mhm.
So we don't know exactly where this melody comes from, but they they know it as a distinctly Jewish tune, or that would be played by Jews, or or bands in the region that were mostly mixed actually between Jews and non-Jews.
Yeah, it struck me that this particular tune, you've mentioned that this repertoire has tunes that are called Freilach, they're called Share, and some other names that have this kind of connection. But this tune in particular has a specific name of a Fundra Chuppah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
mean the other names, what's called Freilachs or Freilich, or they would call it, or there are a lot of shares, or also Bulgarisch or Bulgarias, and they're not necessarily connected to the dances we know under those names, in feel, in tempo. So that connection seems to be lost. There are many share melodies that make for great bulgars as we would dance them today.
mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I pulled up some of the pictures that you shared with me, and I wondered if,
Okay.
we're going to talk some more about the music. We're going to listen to some more music, but
Cool.
I think maybe to orient us here, we could look at some of these pictures. Maybe you could talk about the Baranovsky family, the father, the kids, those kinds of things. As we kind of the sort of the musical situation in this area as you heard about it from the family, and what the composition of the traditional bands is, some of those sorts of issues.
Mm-hmm.
So who's in so this is, we see that this is Dad and Vasil, who was
I
a
don't see it
child
yet.
in this.
It's not
You don't
showing.
see
It's
it.
not showing.
Ah, okay. Let's do this again. So you're like, what are you talking about? Let's share this. How about this? Can we see it now?
Yes.
Okay, cool, great.
Yeah.
So I pulled
So
some of these
on the right,
together.
right on the right, that's the father, Moise Baranovsky, who also passed away. I don't exactly know when, but like I think in the 90s, early 90s. Um, the passionate musician and collector of repertoire and tunes. And on his left is Vasya Baranovsky, who is now the musical director of the Culture House in Kodyma. Kodyma and Sagnikiv are close to another. It's just like a half hour drive at most, 20 minutes. And Vasya first learned to play the drum. He started learning the drums when he was 4. In this picture, he's 5. And he accompanied his father, as soon as he could do it. When his father would go to Moldova over the border on weekends to play and learn repertoire and jam with people, he would accompany him with his small drum and play along. So he's been a drummer all his life before he learned other instruments, and he learned quite a few. He also learned accordion, and he plays piano and trumpet and whatever. He played saxophone for a while, which is quite common also in the area where you still have more of a folk music tradition, that you play different instruments. Yeah, we're now switching to a meeting. There's actually also Vasya Baranovsky. He's the 4th from the right in this picture, and that's a meeting end of the 70s, 1979, I believe. And that was a meeting of musicians that Vasya talks about. That was quite common in the old day, that musicians on holidays would meet from different villages, from different small towns, and would play together and would celebrate together. And a little bit, through that memory, he started Konsonans Retro, the band, a little bit as a revival band, because I think he missed the way it was common to play music together and have bigger brass bands and those kinds of meetings and an exchange of repertoire also. That was important to him, and those brass bands have mostly disappeared from the region. There are a couple of them, but I believe Konsonans Retro is now the only active and professional brass band in the region.
Is this, do you think, because of is it because of the shift from the communist period to the modern period? Is it economic? Is it fashion? I mean, the trends, I mean, it could be all of those things, but.
Right. I think it's all of that. It's an economic situation, of course. There isn't much money. People usually don't have a lot of money, so they can't really hire bigger bands for weddings or other celebrations. It's also globalization, and yes, the whole thing that happened after the Soviet Union collapsed, that people would, go away or would not be that connected, that the traditional culture was less and less important maybe to people. So it's hard to find young people who would continue this tradition, except for in the Baranovsky family. Where
Right.
Vasya's son actually also plays with the band. He became a singer. He works in that's Slava Baranovsky. He works in Kiev in the opera theater today. They perform a lot of folk music also, and he's a professional singer there. But he also still plays with the band, and when he comes home, he mostly plays drums with the band. And the third brother, Vova Baranovsky, he has a son also called Vova Baranovsky Jr., and he's a teenager, but he's now the youngest member of the band. He also learned to play trumpet. So that's kind of a music passionate family. They always, a lot of pictures that you see from Kodyma through the decades, there would always be one or two or three Baranovskys playing music.
Playing music. Yeah, no, that's I mean, the economics, we are all actually today familiar with the economics of being a musician. Like, if there's gigs,
Yes.
you will have more musicians and more, and if there's less opportunity to do it as a even slightly professional occupation, then there's less people who will take the time to become a good musician. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So the picture we're looking at right now, that's from Zakhnitkiv, and that's I think just like a random lineup of musicians who were available. It seemed to have a bigger wedding. It's from 1984. I know it looks a lot older, but it's from 1984. So in that day, you would still have bigger bands every now and then.
So cool. Thank you for walking us through those pictures. I'd like to sort of start talking a little bit about the music itself and sort of digging into some of your recordings and talking about what you heard. But to get us started there, I'd like to do another screen share so that we can listen to a couple of quick tracks to kind of get this sound in our ears. So let's see. Let's try this again. I'm going to go to VLC. I want to play, I'd like to play a couple of clips. And the first one is Share, a so-called Sherul, this one was recorded by Isaac Loboran, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think most of us will hear the klezmer sort of immediately. What I was really struck by in this is sort of the centrality of the drum in this particular track, and the complexity and variation of the drumming. So we can maybe listen for a little bit of that as we check it out. That's, I mean, sounds like Klezmer to me.
Yeah, even if not, it's fun, eh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So I think you feel why I wanted to go there.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's
Yeah.
that complex sort of drumming that's going on. It sounds like, we've got our sort of Bulgar rhythm, but also, I mean, there's the phrasing in the trumpet player. Our lead player is phrasing in a way that feels so familiar.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. I agree. There's like this kind of vocal quality, the sustain, of long notes, and there's, enough krächzen, like our ornamentation even going on, with the drumming, it's interesting because, like, usually, I mean, mostly it would circle around what we know as kind of our Bulgar beat, like the
Mhm.
bum 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 bum
Mhm.
bum bum bum. That would be the strong bass, varied with like a lot of that syncopation that we have been hearing. So in this example, there is more of that syncopation and driving, and straight driving rhythm, and it's quite notey. Um, and I think that also has to do with no trombone being there in that recording, which actually makes
Mhm.
me think that was Vitya Baranovsky, the second brother, who is the trombonist of the band, and who is quite a virtuoso and improvises a lot, with patterns between melody and rhythm. Um, so I think probably the drum is more active because you have less of a mid-voice rhythmic drive
Mhm.
there that would usually been supported by a trombone also. So one or
Cool.
two even, or a tenor horn also, like in this case, in the actual lineup of the band, there's one mid-range instrument, the trombone, who's doing that, and the accordion also, of course.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so the next track I have on my set list here, I actually I want to see if we can squeeze in, well, I want to show you made some recordings of the whole family, of what identify as like the family band, and I think it's cool to like check out what we have with them. So let's listen
Hmm.
to this other little track here. I
Yeah.
if we had another hour, I would play. I want to play everything, but
Yeah, as we just talked about the drumming. Now Maria just like sticks through to that,
straight
to
on it.
that same pattern throughout, which she didn't always do. I think it's also actually because she was nervous being recorded, and it was kind of a special moment. They brought it to Kodyma, to the Culture House where we taped this, where we recorded this. And I just, I asked them, I was curious, what would you play, if you would just like be with the family, you know, at a party, or just like at an evening, what would
Mm.
you do? And they said like, oh, this
Mm.
is this is what we do, this is what we did. Yeah, I can also
Yeah.
tell that Maria was a little bit nervous because she tends to rush a little bit throughout,
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, but she's been drumming on these occasions. She's not a professional, but like she's been drumming at these occasions, all of her adult life at least. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So I wanted to sort of, just so that everybody who's here with us can kind of feast their eyes on a couple of more things.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to show your 2 clips of dancing to this music, 2 of the clips that you sent for dancing, and then I'd love to turn to just how it was for you working with them, what it was like being in rehearsal, you know, sort of getting ready for the gigs that you went on and to do in the recordings that you produced.
Mm-hmm.
So here's some dancing. I think we're going to show birthday dancing.
Yes.
I'll just carry on with this one, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
So, wait. My screen decided to, there we go.
You want to do another one, or should we talk about this?
I think I'd like to, yeah, but I want to, I mean, I do want to watch all of them, but I'm struck in that first video, and I'm sorry that I didn't announce it ahead of time, but the thing that really struck me when I first watched the first video at the party with doing what the music that the band probably often plays these days, is how the way that circle was dancing. It's a much more like what we would think of as a Frelick sort of dance form than some of the other sort of more traditionally Moldavian dance. Although I'm interested to hear from Speranza and Domnul Vasile if they would agree with that. And then of course, you know, Maria and Avia dancing at home there in a very traditionally sort of Jewish posture. So I was interested to hear kind of your reflections on that and how you see the music and the dance influencing each other in this particular area. You know?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of traditional folk dancing, that step that we're doing at the party, that's pretty much what I've seen. You know, that's what happens. That's what they do naturally. That's what they do when they hear music like that. And mostly at these parties, this was a 60th birthday party that the band was invited to, or just like a small band, you know, just like the three brothers. And normally they would just do, I mean, you also saw there's a lot of electronics going on, you know, it's a small band that needs to make the sound for a whole party. Mostly they would just like play a lot of pop songs and also sing, you know, they also sing in close harmony a lot, and do more international popular dances. But every now and then, you know, they start playing this repertoire and also get out the brass, or Vasya would like turn to trumpet, and then Vova would play the keyboard, and also that now Vijay was playing the trombone. That's really always a highlight. You know, you see that people love it. You know, almost that you think like, yeah, can't we do this all night, right? But it's not done. It's not done that much anymore. But when they do it, they do this step and in the moving circle. You know, with a moving circle that always has connection. Also, you know, over the circle that people connect with. You know, gesture and looks. And yes, with Maria, you see a lot of, the hands going on that are so,
Mm-hmm.
essential to us when we think of Jewish dancing and Jewish solo dancing. And, that's one of the chicken and egg questions, was it Jewish first? Was it Moldovan? Was it Ukrainian, Podolian first? Or was there first at all, right? But that seems to be regional to me, especially a tempo for the feel. And I think this is one of the things that I really absorbed there, and that struck me also when I heard them in Vienna, um, because the dances or the tunes are played quite slow, especially when you compare them to Moldovan or Romanian professional national orchestra, right? That's much more virtuosic and where there's a tempo. If that's danceable, it's usually danced by, by very skilled young people or professional dance troupes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their tempo is really settled in the regional, just like ordinary people getting together and old people dancing with young people, so it's a slower pace, and that seems to be really essential to the musical understanding, how they feel a tune, so like, yeah, no, that's a good tempo, and now it's too fast, right? That's really connected to celebration and folk dancing.
Yeah, I definitely hear that when we listen to these tracks, and I think that's a perfect segue into sort of talking about some of the things that we were talking about yesterday on the phone about
Mm-hmm.
rehearsing with the band. I had asked, and I'll ask this question. Um, when you were in rehearsals to go to Krakow and to go do your things, I'm curious, like, how did those rehearsals go? Who was driving the bus, as it were? Who was leading the rehearsals? And then, what were they? What did you end up talking about in terms of both within the ensemble, getting it right, and then also as you were finding your way with them by adding your particular klezmer style and your instrument into the mix?
Yeah, lots of questions.
Yeah.
First, first, I mean, I was driving the bus because, at least in the West, because they weren't allowed to drive outside of Ukraine.
Okay.
but, but certainly not in the rehearsals. No, that was really a mutual thing, like, I mean, of course, we were booked at Jewish festivals, and I'd also, when I, at the point that I talked to the festivals, I said, like, I think this band is really interesting because they have some repertoire that you haven't heard yet, that has not been played, at least to my knowledge, uh, at Jewish festivals in our Yiddish revival scene, Um, so, but that's a reason that I made set lists also, we weren't only playing Jewish music, we were playing like the natural mix, which is, I really wanted it to be that band, not change it and not to appear as anything else, as a klezmer brass band or so, when it is so much more and multifaceted. Um, but I was choosing the repertoire because those guys, Konsonans Retro, they didn't know what was known in the klezmer scene. No, so they also had a bunch of tunes. They were playing a bunch of tunes uh, that are quite common, not that we know, or where you can think they probably come from the same sources. Someone must have heard a recording from an Abe Schwartz recording or whatever, or however it was passed on in that region. So that's why I said, like, no, this tune is interesting. We should play that because people haven't heard it. And then they made a proposal. Like, let's play this tune. And they're like, yeah, it's a great tune, but people really know it well. And I've heard it from many different bands. And sometimes we still chose one of those tunes just because it's interesting to hear it in a different context and with a
Hmm.
different lineup and then that kind of brassy, earthy sound. But playing for Jewish festivals, if we played for Jewish festivals, uh, we mostly focused on the stuff that was not so much known. Yeah, or that was known in part, and I think we're also playing a track. There's some because when I heard the repertoire and they said, like, so what do you know? What tunes do you have and what do you play? They often would start a tune and say, like, oh yeah, this one I know, and then you would go to the next section, to the B section, and say, like, oh no, I don't know that at all. You know? That was fairly
Right.
typical. There was like a body of tunes where that have like one section, you know, that's familiar or shared with other tunes, and then where you immediately see through the regional process, you know, maybe someone only remembered that one section, and then you would just add other stuff, you know, that fits, or they would have known it like that as a complete tune from the beginning, you know.
Right. You sent me a phenomenal example of this exact thing that you're talking about that I want to
Mm.
share a little clip of. Uh, the Belf people in the audience will hear this immediately.
Yeah,
Um,
also the Ape Schwartz people.
and the Age Force people. Oh yeah, yeah,
Which
right.
might be the same
Um,
people in this room, but
yes, it's true. Actually, I don't even know. Is this maybe this isn't a Belf tune? Maybe this is only an Abe Schwartz
no,
tune, and
no, no.
I'm
There
completely out
is
of my mind.
yeah. No, it's called Rominsky Motif as a Belf recording. There's also an Abe Schwartz recording. I forgot the title
The
it
title.
was under. I even believe there's the third one, so it seems to have been around. Yeah, and this is a tune where, you know, that's exactly that, where the first uh, with the exception of like a turnaround, like a first ending and a second ending in the first section, that's almost note by note a tune we know until the
Right.
second section.
Until the second section. So we're going to stop talking about and we're going to play it in a minute. But yes, when you listen through this, listen for the way that the cadences are altered in the first part. And it's not only that they're altered, but they're altered in a particular way, which sort of takes them, I think, away from like a Jewish musical sensibility. Uh, and then just have fun with the rest of it. Ah! Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's an unusual ending for a Jewish tune,
Yeah,
right?
it really is. I don't know what happened with my volume. I tried to turn it down a little bit and it just turned off. Oh my God. Uh, so sorry.
No worries.
I don't know why my volume is like. Hold on. Do you want to say some words,
Hannah says
Christian? I'm
there's a
sure you have some
Hoffman
other things.
recording. That's the third one.
That's right. So I'm going to try and get this share booted up again. And so, can you tell me, a little bit yesterday, you were talking about sort of the Jewishness, like some of the other elements of the Jewishness of their music, and then you were talking about heterophony, and we were talking about phrasing, and can you speak for a minute about some of those aspects of the music that they play that you sort of found this Jewishness that kind of goes a little bit beyond the melodies and what we know as Jewish tunes, but sort of a more Jewish intonatia, if you might say, or a Jewish way of approaching the tunes.
Right, right. What you hear is like, you know, many of these recordings are pretty straightforward. You know, maybe a little bit more straightforward than we would play it. You know, we would assume a traditional klezmer idea. Um, so I think that's definitely something from the region that's in Ukrainian music and especially also in Moldovan music, you know, that you tend to very kind of fast flowing, notey thing that plays in there. Um, that being said, you know, there is a important amount of heterophony, you know, something that is not streamlined, that you also hear in the melody, you know, especially, I mean, they would usually try to really get like bass and drums, you know, like really tight and lined up. But the melody is a little bit more easy, you know, it has more tolerance for heterophony, especially when you hear the cadences, you know, and there would be something that's also very typical in klezmer music, that you rush phrases and endings a little bit, that they actually arrive at your goal note a little bit ahead of the beat. And that's something that's absolutely common there. That's just you know, that just play like that. You know, they all do it, and they all do it to different degrees because they're different people. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
that's already some melodic heterophony that you get there. And then what's striking, of course, you know, to klezmer people is the drumming, the counter rhythms that we know so much from Bulgarians and frelos and shares and everything, that are really important. And drumming is really important. You know, if they would have a small band where you can only have 3 people, they would always hire a drummer before they hire a bass player, or a tuba player, mostly in this case. So that's really essential. It doesn't work without.
Right.
They would even often at rehearsals, even they would even count in that way. They would often just like go jump, 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 instead of giving you four beats on the floor and counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the role of the trombone. That's just like a complete equivalent. It's a little bit long. I mean, the way that Baranovsky plays, he plays a lot of melody also, or second lines to melody, a little bit more than a klezmer trombonist who would stick to the vertical, arpeggio work, rhythmic arpeggio work a little bit more. Which might also be just like a recent change, because he's playing a valve trombone, so melodic playing works easier. It's more virtuosic, and as we know from all the old photographs of klezmer bands, that was the common instrument to play. They had 1 or even 2 valve trombones. And the slide trombone, which is of course has all the other advantages, but is not as fast notey. Is not as not such a strong melody instrument traditionally in a band. That was really, to my understanding, really came in America. I mean, now valve trombones are all over the place, but like Moldovans still play the valve trombones, not the slide trombones. And that tradition isn't around much anymore, but like in Jedinec in North Moldova, where they have something, the heterophony, a strong heterophony, which also strikes us as very klezmerish usually.
Mm-hmm.
There they use at least 1 or 2 valve trombones if they have a bigger band, and they're also heavily improvising. That's a totally improvised role.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
But then,
thank you.
What maybe just like, because you asked about rehearsals also, what's missing in their lineup now is just the higher voice, the higher register, which is not something. I mean, you had brass bands that would also have like a sax or a clarinet on top, and in the old days before it turned so much brass band, you would have more of a mixed lineup, also with violins and a string bass. That was also common at in the old days. But that was something that they really appreciated, and I don't think they were lying about it, just being friendly. That was something that they're like, yeah, that sounds right. If we get the high, the high chirps and some of those, that's, yeah, you do that, that makes sense. That really adds to the sound, or maybe bring something back that was more common in the old days, that I appreciated. And they also loved, when I did, I mean, the more klezmer ornamentation I did, the more between amused and happy they were. They like that stuff really. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. It's great. Yeah, do more of that. It's good.
Cool.
It fits the music. Yeah.
Cool. I'd like to. I'm mindful of our time. It's 10 to 1.
Yes.
So what I'm thinking about doing is I've queued up the Ruminsky motif, and for anybody who wants to hang around a little later, we'll play that. I also queued up the Rehearsal from your Konsonans Retro album, because that's such a beautiful example of a Moldavian tune, and it really shows the heterophony of the inner lines, and shows you playing and adding to the more field recordings that we've listened to so far. But before we get to that, I do want to open up our room for some questions, and I want to ask Clara if she has some things that are queued up to ask, and invite anybody who has a question to either write in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm going into gallery view so we can see everybody.
Yeah, we have several questions that came into the chat. I think let's go to Dan Berkowitz first. You've asked several, so let's jump there. I'm gonna ask you to unmute and you can ask away.
Okay, I guess the first thing I was asking was about the prevalence of button accordions versus piano accordions. Was that commonly seen there, or was there pretty much a mix?
Like in my day in the region, it's pretty much a mix. I mean, they're trained traditionally on button accordions, on Russian instruments. But as all of them also play keyboard instruments, they don't have problems also playing piano accordions. So basically, whatever is around. Like the main accordionist in today's lineup of the band, Vova Baranovsky, he prefers piano accordion.
Okay, also thinking of
But usually yes. But like when they're at home and they sing like Vasya Baranovsky, the oldest brother, he usually plays button accordion.
and thinking of instruments, you may have already addressed this just now about the trombones. But I tend to think of the slide trombones as being more klezmer than a valve trombone. Is that what you experienced?
Um, no, depends on the time. I think because we have many more recordings now that were made in America where the slide trombones came in, to my understanding, that's something. But in the old days, I also just like judging from old photographs, the valve trombones were much more common. I think it's also a thing. It's also a folk thing, a folk music thing. Because people will be trained on different instruments, and it's easy for any trumpeter or a tuba player, to get a valve trombone going. It's a lot more work, more complicated to get a slide trombone going. So I think that's also a reason, why they're just like valve trombones are around, because everybody can play them basically. No.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to ask was about the repertoire.
Mhm.
I didn't see any sheet music there. So I was going to ask, is everything pretty much learned by ear, listening to recordings or other bands, or did they also have sheet music?
They also have sheet music. They write tunes down. Also for band members who are not so familiar with every piece of the repertoire, so they have some handwritten playbooks, but actually they don't contain so many tunes. It's not like there are hundreds of tunes in them. It's more a few dozen of tunes, for the actual repertoire that you play in a concert or so. Actually, Christina also had a good point about that when we talked yesterday. So, like, yeah, usually you often write down the tunes that you don't know that well or that not everybody knows. So I think there's a big bunch that's just been passed on and that was common to play that people just know by heart. Um, but the performance is always without sheet music. Yeah, that's just the way they do it. Also because you always improvise a little bit, even when we would have concerts like formal concerts or playing at festivals, you would improvise a little bit, even while things are pretty much through arranged for the performance.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Let's go to Hankus and then Zev. Hankus, if you want to unmute.
Bill and on camera. Okay, hi. I just wanted to ask if you, in your work with them, ever heard them talk about any musicians in the area that might have inspired them from previous generations, or Jewish musicians that were legendary around them, or any of that. I'm just wondering.
No,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
no, not so much.
Yeah.
I think that they also came a little bit too late for that,
Mhm.
right? Because Vasya the oldest was born in '58, and he actually went to conservatory or got an education, musical education in Odessa itself, but by that time, um, no, not that I've heard of. No,
I mean, just to
not
follow up, I mean,
individuals.
they're in Podolia, right? So They wouldn't
They're at
necessarily.
at the southeastern edge of Podolia.
Moldovan border, more
Yeah,
or less.
yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, I just wondered whether it had any contact with Bad Khanim. I know that there was at least, there were Bad Khanim in the area still in the 1970s, and on the other hand, you're mostly mentioning this starting in the 1980s. So I don't really know whether those guys were still alive. I just wondered whether that was anything. Did they
Yeah.
ever see any of that? No.
No, no. Also
Yeah.
not to my knowledge. No.
Mhm.
Also because it's like it's a small town. It's farmland. People live off the land, and in their village. I don't think there was even a big Jewish population. I mean, there was a bigger population before the war for sure. But people live together, and I don't think. I mean, my impression is that people in the village where they grew up in Sagnitkiv weren't particularly religious. Um, the Christians, the same as the Jews,
Yeah.
and also they wouldn't have the money probably to celebrate a big wedding and invite a batchen.
Thank you.
Christian, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I think you mentioned that their father had played in bands that were mixed with Jews and non-Jews. Did I remember that right?
Yeah, yeah. They had one band in the village that I think at the time, like when I asked, what was the lineup, I think they had at most 12 to 13 people, but usually it would be fewer people, and they were mixed. When they went through what they remembered, I think it was up to 5 Jewish musicians maybe, but they had one band that played for all the occasions. They played for the Jewish weddings and the Christian weddings, and yeah, it was also Soviet times, right? So, and how much Jewish life could be openly celebrated, and in weddings and public celebrations, that's a whole different question. So. Yeah, but it was common. It was common for them to play together. Yeah.
Right. Violin. I know Zev is queued up for a question next, but was there a memory of violin? Had a violin maybe been part of the ensemble earlier, like in the immediate post-war period, or?
2 violins and a string bass, and the other instruments being mostly brass and accordion. Yeah.
Okay.
And drums, of course, always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zev, do you?
Yeah, well, I think it's unlikely that we can get an answer to this. My question was whether there's any indication that anybody remembers that this custom predated the Soviet period. From what you're saying, Christina, it seems unlikely that they would remember such a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody suggested. Because I've been aware of this for like 30 years or something, because, Raisa Gusak, who passed away recently at the conservatory in Vinnytsia, she had done some field work. And Izali Zemsovsky had met some of these people back, I think it must have been in the early 1990s. I'd arranged for Izali to speak at the Evo. So that's quite a long time ago. And just at the end of the Soviet period. But nobody had done that kind of research to really ask the oldest generation whether this was a pre-Soviet custom or not. I talked to Izali about it recently. He also didn't know. So nobody dropped any hints.
Nobody, no.
No. Okay.
Not there. I also assume it was just like maybe a bit too provincial, for them to witness more of Jewish life, Jewish celebration, because there weren't so many people around when they grew up, right?
Yeah.
And today, anyway, not, right? After the fall of the communism, like almost everybody left for Israel. Actually, once, I walked through the streets with my friend Vazia, and he pointed, he just greeted a friend across the street and said, like, yeah, this is the last Jew in Kodyma, And I said, like, well, how come he didn't go to Israel like the others? And he said, yeah, he did. He just didn't like it and came back.
I guess last question, Christian. for them, does the word klezmer mean anything? Is it part
means
of their
musician.
local?
It means
Do they
musician.
use it?
Yeah. They
They
use
do.
it. They use it. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Hmm.
They would say, you know, like,
Hmm.
I think it's not necessarily in their everyday language anymore, you know, but they absolutely understand it. And they would, you know, like, would point to people and say, like, yeah, he's also a klezmer. And that guy also, there,
Oh,
he's also a klezmer. Yeah.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure in how far that might have been inspired, you know, by us folk
Ah,
singers.
I see.
That's entirely
I see.
possible, you know, but
Right,
it's
right,
a, yeah, but the word is common and they all know it. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
Okay.
Mm.
I wanted to ask. I see that Jerry has a question.
Hmm.
I wanted to put a seed in to think about while we get this next question. I wanted to ask Dwama Speranza and Vasile if they had any comments about the music that we've heard, and particularly about the dancing and the tempos as being different from other parts of, like, the more western part of Moldova, the Romanian Moldova, or, you know, if there's anything that sounds sort of distinctive to you as people who are very familiar with the folkloric music of this region. So I'm going to bookmark that for you and come back to you, but let's have Jerry's question.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one kind of guitar nerdy question. I noticed that in the party, the guy was playing an electric guitar. I mean, is that? I mean, I was wondering if you knew what kind of guitar it was, or if playing electric guitar was kind of common in that region in general, at all. You know.
It's a modern pop thing.
Well,
you
I'm
know.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
just something they like and they enjoy. As to that model of electric guitar, I just don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, right.
So, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just because
No,
I
it's
play,
just,
so I was
something they enjoy, and they would also. I mean, now in this clip we saw Vitya Baranovsky play the valve trombone, but he would also play a lot of the electric bass on these occasions. You know, it's just to get a more modern pop
Yeah.
sound, to get the young folks dancing as well.
And one more question, not connected with that. Do you have any idea of the musicians from Kolomea? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. And why that's not so far on the map, it's not really their culture. You know, it's not really the culture of the guys there. I even asked, you know, do you play any Kolomakis? And so, like,
Yeah.
No, we don't.
Yeah, because my
that's
family.
not our repertoire. That's way too far off. You know.
Right. Yeah, because my Bubba on my father's side came from, whose last name was Spielman, played in the Kolomea Klezmorim, she
Wow.
said, which I have no doubt that she was right. And I've been too lazy to dig in more, but I thought maybe you might have some idea of, I mean, we don't need to do it here, but how I might go about researching that, or if you had done, or anybody had done any research about the klezmer bands from that area.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, what I have, you know, at experience, I wouldn't even say knowledge, is really mostly focused on that region. Because also, you know, I didn't go there as a scholar, as a proper scholar. You know, I just went there as a musician, playing, doing stuff. And of course, I had, you know, my list of questions grew because I'm a curious musician, but I'm still, you know, mostly a player and not a field researcher. So
yeah, I mean, nobody seems to have any. I've asked around, and no one seems to have any knowledge about that. You know, but
so maybe you need to go yourself.
Maybe it's up to me. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. Great. I loved. Wonderful talk.
Thank you, Jerry.
Great. Does Speranza, do you have anything to sort of comment about this music, perhaps, if you wanted to unmute, and or Domnul Vasile, if you have something, if you speak in Romanian, I can translate for you. You need to unmute yourself, Speranza. there should be a little microphone at the bottom left of your picture. And click on that. Oh, there you go. Now you can speak. Oh, click it again. Go ahead and one more time. Click your microphone, and we'll get you. There we go. Now you're here.
I was surprised to see how similar are the music I heard. Most of them. Can you hear me?
Yes, if you come close to the screen, we can hear you.
For instance, one of the pieces could have been slightly different playing Moldavia. But I'm not surprised at all because I met with the same situation in Northern Moldova. And I know that the different population changed music, and each of them had a peculiar style of production. For instance, I'm unclear, am I?
A little bit unclear. It's a little hard to hear you, but that's
Yes.
okay.
Okay, no, it's not okay.
Yeah.
I noticed also the fact that wind instruments are dominant in the region, as in Moldavia too, and they became more and more common nowadays. What else? The speed of the dance music, which is different. For instance, Moldavian from Moldova, both Moldova are dancing in a speed way, speedy way.
Yeah.
All kinds
Are you?
of differences, or on the contrary, similarities. But it's too early to say something because I know very few things about the music of Ukraine or Poland or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I quickly comment?
Yeah, sure.
Because you say like at least one of these tunes could be Moldovan, and I totally agree. No, it's also for me that's a lot of shared repertoire. Where you it's hard to point out. Like even when I would often ask the question, this piece or even this section, because we had different sections that the one would sound more Jewish, the other one would sound more Moldovan. When I would ask about the origin, do you know, is this like a Roma melody? Is this a Moldovan, Ukrainian, Jewish? They often would just shrug, right? And say like, well, it's also mixed, and that's natural to us, kind of how mixed it is. We can't really point this out. It's more a question really of how you play it, what's your style, what's your intonation, intonation.
Sometimes the styles are different. Very few differences between the Romanian voice and the Jewish style. I have made some experience with them. They assured me that this played for the Romanians and these other that played as what they do. And I made
Unfortunately, Speranza, we're having a very difficult time hearing you. So we'll have to follow up with you afterwards on this, unfortunately. There's something about your microphone that is a little challenging, and maybe the distance. But I think we can reconvene these questions afterwards. But as we sort of get to the end of our time here, I wanted to ask you, Christian, one more question, which is a little bit more abstract and a little bit more general. Like, you and I both grew up we grew up outside of Eastern Europe, and we have both spent time there doing these kinds of things. And I just wanted to ask you to reflect a little bit on, what it is, some things that you learned just by being there that have stuck with you. Whether it's just being in the room, being in the village, being in the bar late at night, something like that. The things that you really get by being there, as opposed to learning from a recording or learning even at a camp. When we come to teach at Klez Canada and various places.
Yeah, I think that's not such an abstract question at all.
It's a big question. How about that? It's a big question.
No, but what was refreshing to me is just to be in an environment where there's a shared collective feel for a style, whatever that style may be, however you want to call it, or however that's may be defined, but a feeling for people who say like, yes, that's the right tempo for this melody, and that's how we dance to it, and that sounds right, and what you're doing is a little bit off, or you wouldn't play that line, with a trombone or a tuba or so, that's not the way, we feel it here, and have that as an environment, and not just as an opinion drawing from so many sources, because we just lost that connection to a world where this kind of folk style is still active, in whatever derived way or non-derived way, that's a lot to discuss and to research. That was something that definitely, gave me a lot of understanding, of musical understanding, also just as a mirror, to see like, okay, there is a style, there is a feeling, of course, everybody feels a little bit different, but there is some common ground. And if you leave that, it just doesn't sound right anymore to people.
Right. Right.
And that was very refreshing, because like I'm not Jewish. I didn't grow up even in a folk environment mostly. I grew up with pop and classical music and everything. And but I'm a musician, so I'm a chameleon, right? And our job as professional musicians, to learn styles and do them hopefully with not too much of an accent. So, but I've learned that music mostly from people who had learned it, and it had been transported, it had emigrated to the United States mostly, and I was lucky enough to play and learn from the greatest players, in the Klezmer revival, and I learned a whole lot. But then it was amazing to me to go to a world and connect to a world that knew nothing about a Klezmer or Yiddish revival or that scene. They had basically no contact to it. I think like Isaac Loberan was the first link coming there and saying like, hey, that's what's going on, and it's super interesting what you guys are doing to a whole different audience. And then playing repertoire that they knew and that in part at least sounded distinctively Jewish to me, and having through their style clear connections to that world I was diving into and I was trying to learn. That was important.
That's tremendous, and I really appreciate. Yeah, you feel kind of instantly at home, and you talked a little bit yesterday about this idea that these guys they're creating like a revival band, that, for music that has direct continuity in its location, right? It's fallen out of it's. The economics don't allow for people to hire these big bands anymore. But you had mentioned that when they play this music, everybody goes bananas. Everybody loves it. Everybody really appreciates it.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like, just in time. In their town, there are many amateur musicians. They also play brass instruments and the whole wind instrument thing, the whole brass band thing. I think that's also a strong Soviet influence, actually, that it turned more to these bands also for the occasions you have, playing marches at official, Soviet holidays and all that. And that also made it easier for me to go there because I'm also a wind instrument player, you know, and I play
Right.
clarinet and saxes, and by now also more brass stuff. But so that's kind of, you know, where it was easier for me personally, you know, with musical experience to dive in there. and
Right.
learn.
Right. So unfortunately, thank you, Christian. I think that's a beautiful point, and it's a great point for us to unfortunately have to say that we need to start wrapping up our conversation. I'd like to say some thank yous, and we'll sort of wrap up. But I do want to but for anybody who does want to stick around for a few more minutes, I want to play those couple of more tracks. The Ruminsky motif and a couple of the actual Konsonans Retro tracks, so we can really hear the sort of the more field recording, and then the more polished, rehearsed Konsonans Retro repertoire that developed. But before we go there, I wanted to thank again Clara Byam for being our tech facilitator today. We'd like to once again thank the Congregation Albert for partially funding this program. I mean, they've given us a donation that really helps support the program. Of course, your donations will also help support the program. So there's a donation link in the chat if you want to throw a couple of bucks in the tip jar. And also just huge thank you to Christian for sharing all this music, sharing the recordings,
thanks
sharing
for
your
having
time.
me. It's really a pleasure.
Big snaps. So, and then we have Doamna Speranța Radulescu will be coming up in, I think, 2 weeks, and then Vasile Kisalica will be coming up 2 weeks again after that. For those of you who are not familiar with Speranța's work, she has been working with Roma Lautar musicians like since the 1970s and into the 80s, and she knows just a tremendous amount about everything to do with Roma music in Romania. So I'm really looking forward to talking with her. And she also has done some incredibly important work with surfacing Jewish music in Botoșani, which is sort of the in-between region between, Botoșani, Republic of Moldova, and then Kodyma. Like they're all sort of connected geographically and culturally. So we'll talk about that music during her conversation as well. And then Vasile has done some tremendous work also in Ukraine, working with Jewish music. And we'd like to talk to him about the work that he's done researching the history of some of our klezmer lineages. He did a great article about the Lemish family that we'll talk about in his conversation. So with that official sort of sign off, let me share the screen again, and let's listen to some tunes. I think, yes, and Clara has dropped the link into the chat that apparently is going to work. So let's see. Okay, so here's the Ruminsky motif that we were talking about earlier, hopefully with sound. Not the Ruminsky motif. That was a different tune, and I don't know why this doesn't want to play the thing that I wanted to play. That was a great tune, but it was not that tune. Let me try again. I'm having some technical. I just find that to be amazing. Does anybody, I mean, you know, it's exactly that thing that you were talking about where it's a part that we know, other parts, you know, kind of a little bit mixed together. Does anybody have any comments they want to just throw in about that? Just go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand, or we've got, if you have a comment, go for it, Zev, unmute yourself. You gotta make the unmutes. I can't hear you.
Unmute? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you are unmuted.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, that may have been recorded in America as the Sadogor Chosid. Maybe I'm wrong. But what's interesting to me, one, is played at twice the tempo of a Jewish recording. And also they've altered the cadence. That it starts off the way the tune that we know starts, but they have another idea for a cadence, which is not a Jewish cadence. I think it's a purposeful. The increase in the tempo and the change in the cadence changes the whole atmosphere of the melody.
Yeah,
That's my only
absolutely.
comment.
Yeah, I wanted to. Yes, that's pretty much what I heard there. But then we have another tune. There's another tune here that I wanted to play, which is this is from the Konsonans Retro session from the actual album. This is something that you had obviously rehearsed and worked up. This is the Rehearsal. And the thing that I find interesting here is not only how beautifully the clarinet sort of fits in to it, but this is also one of our tunes from Stoyanov. I think this is in the Kontakty Pahar repertoire from Stoyanov, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know which number. Right? Yeah. Yes, at least the first part. So this may, watch your ears. It's conceivable that this will play quite loud, so just keep an eye on your volume. Absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, it's funny. There's something about you know, about the arrangement. I noticed that like in the moments we recorded or we had like bigger concerts, that musicians often tend to stick more to a fixed way of playing. No, which is like absolutely clear in the case of the trombonist Vitali Baranovsky, who is like a great improviser, you know, who would never play a thing twice the same, basically, you know. But here he does. He has this counter line, you know, the thing that works, okay. And that's something, you know, that's just a different approach playing in a concert or putting something on CD, you know, that's maybe an idea of, okay, let's make this professional and let's not, you know, fiddle around too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's definitely a change from, you know, just playing at a party or, you know, or for folk dancing.
Yeah. But it sounds very, I mean, that sounds almost, you know, that line, the trombone line in particular, sounds like it almost could have been, you know, something that Dan Blacksburg would have played in that place. I mean, it's different, but the role that he's playing, you know.
Yeah. And Dan and Vitya love each other, so
No,
Dan has
no big
always
surprise there.
sat in with the band, you know, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Jerry, I see you have a question there. Do you want to go for that? Go for
Yeah,
it.
I just was entered my mind is that, do you think that there's any connection between the lack of violins and clarinets and the lack of Jews?
Might be. It's a big question.
I
Right?
think, yeah, I mean, it just struck me, you know, because of what you had said earlier and listening to the recordings and the fact that there aren't Jews there anymore, you know.
Yeah, I mean, Isaac Loberon, who kind of found the band first, you know, for us, um, he makes a quite strong case about, you know, brass bands really being also a Soviet influence or being encouraged, you know, by the Soviet Union. Because I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, what do you do if you have like, I mean, two suppressed peoples, you know, in one place, Ukrainians, actually three, Ukrainians and Roma and Jews and more probably. Um, so, you know, to not encourage too much individualism, right? And I think that violin, string instruments stood a lot more for individual expression and also classical playing, you know, all the great virtuosos, you know, especially in the Odessa region in the whole school, you know. So I think it was probably more a political thing. It was more politically adequate to, you know, hand a trumpet to a young boy in a Komsomol camp than, you know, give him access to the Odessa Conservatory. You know? So that might play a big role. Yeah, especially also like how, you know, when is there an opportunity to really play, and also what's available, you know. So like also brass instruments, you know, being available through military bands, that certainly also plays a big role. Um, yeah, and some of the guys, you know, have also been trained, or part of their training was in their service for the Red Army, you know. So that's
Yeah.
So there's certainly something in there. I wouldn't just like, you know, I don't want to paint it black and white, but I think there's certainly something to that idea. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because particularly the Jewish Odessa classical violin players are, you know, are some of the great, you know, most of us know who they are, you know, the Oistreich boys and, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a question here. Are there any Baranovsky recordings of non-duple meter tunes? Like I think what we're talking about is there Jacques? Is there things in 6/8?
Yeah, we have a few Jacques, not too many actually, you know. Yeah, but there are a few, but the big body of that repertoire is 2 meter. Yeah.
Yeah. So they should listen to the Konsonans Retro recording to
CDs,
find
absolutely.
the CDs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go on iTunes and yeah.
Yes. Yeah. On the iTunes, on the YouTubes. Great.
Yeah.
There's Lauren is asking how the three accordions playing together divided up melody harmony functions.
I wasn't there, but it's a great question. Yeah, unfortunately, Lauren, I don't know how arranged that was that they played, you know, but it's easily, because I mean, I would imagine that they would divide it up a little bit, you know, and that you would have probably one main voice and that you would stay away a little bit from just like playing 2 harmony lines yourself, but leaving maybe another harmony line up to the other ones. But because they're just musical people and they love to play it, and they love to play harmony lines.
So I mean, I thought when I saw that, is that a photo op, or were there accordion bands, or what? Do you know anything about that? And of course, it's a lot of notes.
I don't know.
Together,
No.
so.
No, it must have been some holiday, where there is just also a musical program, and they were part of the musical program, and that was, yeah. That's all I know about that. Yeah.
Okay, I think from Harvey, given the poverty in the region, how often might there have been weddings with hired bands amongst Jews, amongst non-Jews, currently or historically? I mean, I think, Christian, you've kind of a little bit answered this question, which is that in the past, certainly it's the picture in 1984 and before, there was an opportunity for those larger bands to be hired, and probably after 1990 and later, there's been less of the larger bands and a shift in the repertoire to more contemporary popular
right.
instruments and music.
Yeah, probably not too much, I mean, also like you don't need to earn a lot of money all the time, right? So they would also do things for a little money, of course, or also like one wedding where I taped a little bit in 2006. They picked up with a band. They picked up the bride and brought her to the groom's house and played there for a little bit. And these were very poor people. They told me they don't have any money, so I didn't think, except for a bottle of booze was probably the pay and food.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just judging that, like this one of the photos we saw, that was a wedding, a celebration where they took quite a lot of photos, and that might tell us that those opportunities were not,
so much.
plenty. Yeah, not too much.
Yeah. Okay, the last thing I want to share, and then we really are going to wrap things up, is this really adorable and video of a younger son. Like, this must be like a grandson, and he is at a party, and he's learning how to play the rhythm.
That's Vova Baranovsky Jr., who now plays the trumpet in the band, who's now 15, I think he is. Yeah, he's become a member of the band, and he learned from the old playbooks, and he just loves the stuff, and he's just doing that. Yeah, I think there he was 4 or 5 or so, and he's just like, yeah, exactly, learning to get the basic drum pattern.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this really short video. We may end up playing it twice because it flips over. It's quite short, but the thing that really struck me is that the accordion player, it's the accordion player and the young person.
It's his father. Yeah.
It's his father, and he establishes the rhythm with the accordion first. And then the son is starting to go on the table, and then the accordion player, immediately shifts into a more straight duple time as he's now playing the tune. So just keep an eye out for that as we get into it.
He's also a very good music teacher. So I think there was a kind of pedagogy in this, I established it, and now you see if you can hold it.
Right. So here we go.
So,
Yeah.
Was there a video with that, Christina?
I'm sorry?
We couldn't see the video.
You couldn't see the video.
No.
Oh no.
We only had
Really?
the audio.
Oh, that sucks.
Try
We'll talk about this later. Yeah, what?
just close out of your screen
again?
share and redo that once more. End your screen. Yeah.
I even screen. I'm screen sharing again. Can you see it? Not some. There's something about this that you can probably only see my VLC and not the video. I don't know why that is. It may be possible to post this on a private link. Let me talk to Christian after this. I want to make sure that I don't share something that shouldn't be shared. But let's see if we can figure out a way that that you can tune back in and check out that video, because it is adorable and very sweet. Although, yeah, sorry about that, technical difficulties. But with that, I'd like to just say once again, thanks to Christian, and
Thanks
to all of you who came here today to join in this conversation. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thank you, Klezmer Institute.
Yes,
Clara
thank
and
you.
Christina and everybody working so hard on this whole series and this whole thing. It's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, if you have not been there already, please go check out our the Kisselhoff Makinovetsky digital manuscript project. Has everybody heard about this from us? Yes, yes. This is a tremendous opportunity to really get our hands on first-hand materials. The original notebooks from the Ansky expeditions. We don't have all of them, but we have a ginormous amount of music that's mostly instrumental music that we're going to be going through. We're going to try to digitize it. We're going to try to create and develop a community project to digitize and transform this music. So we invite you to be part of that. We're going to be building it from now. We don't have a top-down structure. We want to have a ground-up community structure for that project. So check it out. All right, thank you.